change it needs, and I'd look at strengthening it because I think the dangers are literally that great. And again, I spent years studying this stuff. You start thinking about one nuclear weapon in one American city and the scale of loss of life, and you ask yourself, what should the president be capable of doing to stop that? And you come up with a very different answer. Again, very sharp division. Criminal law, the government should be, frankly, on defense, and you're innocent until proven guilty. National security, the government should have many more tools in order to save our lives.
Congressman Paul, I suspect you disagree.
I do.
Tell us why.
I think the Patriot Act is unpatriotic because it undermines our liberty. I'm concerned, as everybody is, about the terrorist attack. Timothy McVeigh was a vicious terrorist. He was arrested. Terrorism, still on the books, internationally and nationally, is a criminal. It's a crime, and we should deal with it. We dealt with it rather well with Timothy McVeigh. But why I really fear it is we have drifted into a condition that we were warned against because our early founders were very clear. They said, don't be willing to sacrifice liberty for security. Today, it seems too easy that our government and our Congresses are so willing to give up our liberties for our security. I have a personal belief that you never have to give up liberty for security. You can still provide security without sacrificing our Bill of Rights.
I want to bring others in, but do you want to respond, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah. Timothy McVeigh succeeded. That's the whole point. Timothy McVeigh killed a lot of Americans. I don't want a law that says, after we lose a major American city, we're sure going to come and find you. I want a law that says, you try to take out an American city, we're going to stop you.
This is like saying that we need a policeman in every house, a camera in every house, because we want to prevent child beating and wife beating. You can prevent crimes by becoming a police state. So if you advocate the police state, yes, you can have safety and security, and you might prevent a crime, but the crime then will be against the American people and against our freedoms, and we will throw out so much of what our revolution was fought for. So don't do it so carelessly.
Congresswoman Bachmann, let me bring you into this conversation. Are you with Congressman Paul or Speaker Gingrich, or you have your own view?
Well, I'm with the American people, with the Constitution, and with the job of the Commander-in-Chief as the #1 duty of the President of the United States. We have to realize we're in a very different war, with very different techniques that are used for that war, and very different bad actors than we've had before in the terrorists, and their motivations are very different. We can't forget that technology is completely different. When we were looking at prior laws, phones were wired into walls. That's not how it works anymore. Today we deal with wireless functions, and we have to completely change the way that we go about investigating. This is one thing we know about Barack Obama. He has essentially handed over our interrogation of terrorists to the ACLU. He's outsourced it to them. Our CIA has no ability to have any form of interrogation for terrorists. When the bomber, or the attempted bomber over Detroit, the underwear bomber, was intercepted, he was given Miranda warnings within 45 minutes. He was not an American citizen. We don't give Miranda warnings to terrorists, and we don't read them their rights. They don't have rights.
Governor Huntsman, where do you stand on the Patriot Act? Do you believe it's un-American, as Congressman Paul has suggested?
I think we have to be very careful in protecting our individual liberties. We forget sometimes that we have a name brand in this world, and I have seen it shine living overseas. And when our light shines based on the values that we live up to and represent, it moves people, it moves countries, it moves events like nothing else can. We are a nation of values, and forever, like what we're trying to do in this debate tonight, we'll try to find that balancing act between our individual liberties and security. But we also have to remember, as we're talking about security, I see Tom Ridge in the audience here, a great former Secretary of Homeland Security. He will tell you that we cannot secure the homeland out of Washington, D.C. itself. We've got to make sure that we have partnerships with governors and mayors, that this is a national effort. No longer can we compartmentalize intelligence. Those are the old days. Today, we've got to share. We've got to make sure that we are prepared as a people. We are prepared not only as a federal government, but we're prepared as well as a local government in a collaborative and sharing kind of relationship.
I'm going to give everyone a chance to respond, but let me get this one question from CNN Politics that came to cnnpolitics.com, and then we'll bring in the rest of you. This is the question: TSA pat-downs, violation of civil liberty or a necessity to ensure national security? Governor Romney.
Well, we can do a lot better than the TSA system. It's going to get better over time. We can use better technology. We can also identify people who are lower risk and allow them to go through the process more quickly than the current process. But let's come back to the issue that seems to be so confusing here. And that is, Congressman Paul talked about crime. Newt Gingrich was right. There are different categories here. There is crime, and there are rights that are afforded to American citizens under our Constitution and those that are accused of crime. Then there is war, and the tool of war being used today in America and around the world is terror. There's a different body of law that relates to war. And for those that understand the difference between the two, they recognize that we need tools when war is waged domestically to assure that as President of the United States, you can fulfill your first responsibility, which is to protect the life, liberty, and property of American citizens and defend them from foes domestic and foreign. And that means, yes, we'll use the Constitution and criminal law for those people who commit crimes. But those who commit war and attack the United States and pursue treason of various kinds, we will use instead a very different form of law, which is the law afforded to those who are fighting America.
Governor Perry, you proposed legislation that would criminalize these TSA pat-downs under circumstances. Explain what you have in mind.
Well, here's what I do with the TSA. I would privatize it as soon as I could and get rid of those unions. It's working. In Denver, they have a program where they're privatizing it, and the airlines and other private sector groups work together to do the security in our airports, and it makes abundant good sense. And I agree with most of my colleagues here on the stage when we talk about the Patriot Act, and we need to keep it in place. We need to have strengthen it if that's what's required, to update it with new technologies as they come along, Newt. But here's the other issue that I think we've really failed at, and that is in our ability to collect intelligence around the world. And this administration in particular has been an absolute failure when it comes to expending the dollars and supporting the CIA and the military intelligence around the world to be able to draw in that intelligence that is going to truly be able to allow us to keep the next terrorist attack from happening on American soil.
Senator Santorum, under certain circumstances in the past, you've supported profiling. Is that correct?
I have.
What do you have in mind?
Well, I mean, I think TSA is a good example of that. We should be trying to find the bomber, not the bomb. Other countries have done it. Israel is probably the best example of that. But to put this enormous expense on the federal government, to put the enormous expense on the traveling public for pat-downs and other intrusions, I think is too much money. I agree with Governor Perry. I actually voted when this bill came up. I voted to allow for privatization. I was not for this being a government function. I thought it could be a private function. But the issue of the Patriot Act is a little different. We are at war. The last time we had a threat at home like this, obviously it was much more of a threat at home, was during the Civil War. And of course, Abraham Lincoln ran right over civil rights. Why? Because we had a present domestic threat. In the previous wars that we've had, we haven't had this type of threat that we have here in the homeland, and we have to deal with it differently. I disagree with Governor Huntsman. He made some good points. And we have had the debate. It's been an open debate. It's really showed the values of our country that we can engage in this open debate and balance those interests, and I think we have done so appropriately.
So just to be precise, is it ethnic profiling, religious profiling? Who would be profiled?
Well, the folks who are most likely to be committing these crimes. If you look at it, I mean, obviously it was people. Obviously, Muslims would be someone you'd look at. Absolutely, those are the folks who are the radical Muslims, are the people that are committing these crimes, as we've by and large, as well as younger males. I mean, these are things that not exclusively, but these are things that you profile to find your best, the most likely candidate.
Congressman Paul,
That's digging a hole for ourselves. What if they look like Timothy McVeigh? You know, he was pretty tough criminal. I think we're using too much carelessness in the use of words that we're at war. I don't remember voting on a declaration of war. Oh, war against terrorism. And terrorism is a tactic. It isn't a person. It isn't a people. So this is a very careless use of words. What about this? Sacrifice liberties because they're terrorists? You're the judge and the jury? No, they're suspects. And they have changed in the DOD budget, they have changed the wording on the definition of Al-Qaeda and Taliban. It's anybody associated with organizations, which means almost anybody can be loosely associated. So that makes all Americans vulnerable. And now we know that American citizens are vulnerable to assassination. So I would be very cautious about protecting the rule of law. It will be a sacrifice that you'll be sorry for.
Herman Cain, let's bring you into this conversation. Are you with Senator Santorum when he says that there should be religious profiling, that Muslims in particular should get extra screening when they go through airports?
I believe we can do a whole lot better with TSA, and I call it targeted identification.
What does that mean?
We can do targeted identification. If you take a look at the people who have tried to kill us, it would be easy to figure out exactly what that identification profile looks like. But I want to make sure that I get to the Patriot Act. So I believe we can do a whole lot better. The answer, I believe, also may be privatization. Now, relative to the Patriot Act, if there are some areas of the Patriot Act that we need to refine, I'm all for that. But I do not believe we ought to throw out the baby with the bathwater for the following reason. The terrorists have one objective that some people don't seem to get. They want to kill all of us. So we should use every means possible to kill them first or identify them first.
But just to be precise, Mr. Cain, I just want to give you a chance. Is it okay for Muslim Americans to get more intensive pat-downs or security when they go through airports than Christian Americans or Jewish Americans?
No, Blitz, that's oversimplifying it. I happen to believe that if you allow our intelligence agencies to do their job, they can come up with an approach. I'm sorry, Blitz, I meant Wolf, okay? Blitz, Wolf. Since we're on a Blitz debate, I apologize. Wolf, what I'm saying is, let's ask the professionals to give us an approach of how we can increase the identification of people that might be a danger to civilians as well as a danger to this nation.
Thank you, Cain. All right, go ahead. We have another question. Please give us your name and the organization you represent.
I'm Fred Kagan, resident scholar and director of the Critical Threats Project at the American Enterprise Institute. And my question is, the raid that killed Osama bin Laden was obviously an important success in the struggle against al-Qaeda, although it also drove U.S. relations with Pakistan to a new low. Do you think that an expanded drone campaign in Pakistan would be sufficient to defeat al-Qaeda and to secure our interests in Pakistan?
Governor Huntsman.
Let me just say that as we talk about foreign policy, let's be reminded that in order to have an effective foreign policy, we need a Washington that works. Today we have a president who can't lead. We have a Congress that can't even figure out how to balance our budget. They need term limits, by the way. We've got to get our house in order if we... Thank you. We've got to get our house in order if we're going to expect to get anything done overseas, because when our light shines, we can influence the rest of the world. Pakistan is a concern. That's the country that ought to keep everybody up at night. You have not President Zardari in charge, but General Kiani over the military, which also is responsible for ISI. You've got the youngest demographic of the 160 million people in Pakistan. You've got a madrasa movement. You've got over 100 nuclear weapons. You've got trouble on the border. You've got a nation state that is a candidate for failure. And I say it's a haven for bad behavior. It's a haven for training. The people who seek to do us harm, and an expanded drone program is something that would serve our national interest. I think it must be done, and I think it must be consistent with recognizing the reality on the ground of what we need out of Afghanistan. We don't need 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. We don't need a nation build in Afghanistan when this nation so desperately needs to be built.
We're going to get to Afghanistan.
We need something.
Congresswoman Bachmann, let me bring you in. You're a member.
Special forces and drones.
All right, you're a member of the Intelligence Committee. Well, do you think, as Governor Perry has said, that Pakistan should no longer receive U.S. aid because they've shown they're not a good friend, ally of the United States?
Pakistan has been the epicenter of dealing with terrorism. They are, as Governor Huntsman said, there are al-Qaeda training grounds there. There's also